Hello, folks. It's me, Patrick from Outrageous Insight, a man who has a deep love and fascination with my motherland of Sweden. My mum grew up in Stockholm, and then my grandmother lived in this little quaint fishing village about an hour outside Sweden that was known as World's End or Trosa. And if you ever get a chance, please go and visit Trosa. That meant that I've been doubly excited today to interview my guest. One of the other guests who's been on this show, Donna Bruns, from formerly the VP of Product at Fjällräven, a product name that, again, sorry, Donna, I've mispronounced really, really badly. You know, I claim to be half Swedish, and then I've mispronounced your brand name. Said, whatever it takes, get this person on your show. And it's taken a little while, but I am delighted today to introduce the Chief Creative Officer and formerly co-founder at Houdini, the progressive Swedish outdoor brand who is Eva Karlsson. Eva, how are you?
I'm great, Patrick. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, I am delighted. And I said, we were just discussing in the preliminary chat, like how, I was saying like how easy it is. We're all like sort of showing a curated version of ourselves to the internet and this sort of thing. And, I was saying to you that I was broadcasting from a converted child's bedroom, and you are sitting in front of a building with a color that can only be described as iconic across Sweden. Like that red is basically a color that you will see in tens of thousands of buildings. Just talk to us a little bit, just where you are in Sweden at the moment, Eva, before we come into the full introduction for you.
Yes, I'm up in the mountains in Jämtland, which is the northern part of Sweden. It's like old rolling mountains. Beautiful summer day. It's a bit of a rainy day, but I got up really early together with my friends and family, and we went out for a hike super early this morning, and now I just came back. So I'm actually sitting where I have a good connection, which is in the car outside the cabin where we're staying. So a bit of I apologize for beautiful scenery quite a little further away, but not that beautiful with a car in the, yeah.
Totally understandable. And folks, if you've, I've just given the sort of state-sponsored tourism advert for Trosa, but if you ever get a chance to go to Jämtland as well, incredible skiing and walking, you may bump into Eva. I mean, I'm not going to sort of organize her diary for her, but you may even bump into her as well. So what could be better? Now, Eva, I like to just sort of get what I call like the sort of corporate piece out the way first. Why don't you just tell the people? I'm sure most people who listen to this show will have heard of Houdini, but those who haven't, just give us a bit of a pen portrait and describe the business that you have co-founded and what it actually does, and more importantly, what it stands for, because I know how near and dear this is to your heart.
Well, Houdini, it's a mountaineering outdoor brand. That's how it all started. I would say it wasn't meant to become a company. It was more a bunch of friends, climbing buddies, who made gear for themselves that was smarter than what was on the market at that time. And that was in the early 90s. And then we've moved on and, reimagined everything is the way I would put it. Because if you think about, and I guess we'll get back into this in more detail, but, there's so many things about how an outdoor brand and all us outdoor people who love nature, how we design products nowadays and how we build our businesses and grow and so forth, that has nothing to do with loving nature, but rather the opposite, exploiting nature and not intentionally and not on purpose, not even thinking about it in the daily operations. But anyways, so thinking about business and how could we then grow a company like Houdini in an entirely different way, where we work together with nature rather than against nature, or explore how to potentially be able to anyways.
I love that, Eva. And tell me, why the name Houdini? I know we're going to get into all of those substantive bits, but I'm
Yeah.
so curious about the name. Like, why that name?
Well, back then, I know I live in Stockholm, and there's a lot of nature just in and around Stockholm. And one spot where there's a lot of boulder climbing going on, there's like the most tricky boulder to climb, it's the Houdini block. And I think that Harry Houdini, the escape artist, might have been a house god among climbers everywhere. So these smart Houdini pieces that came about in the late 80s, early 90s, they got the name Houdini because they were smart, disappeared in your pack. I don't know, something like that. And when it evolved into a company, it was a natural thing to name the company Houdini. And I think still the escape artist Harry Houdini, or the escape act of, being somewhere on climbing, for instance, where you need to kind of find a way to get out of a tricky situation, that is still relevant today. So anyways, that's how we got the name Houdini back in the days.
There's a really great book. I don't know if you've ever read it, called The Adventures of Cavalier and Clay. And it's about these two kids in New York who are obsessed with comic book heroes and with escape and with all these sorts of things. And they start to basically get into the comic book industry. And as you were talking about Houdini, it really reminded me of that book. It's absolutely amazing. I'm going to send it to you after this, Eva, because I think you will really, really enjoy it. It's a book that I read a long, long time ago, but it's brilliant. And I think it's strange, isn't it? You started back in the 90s. I know we're going to get into the story of like why you decided to try and do business differently, but just give us a bit of a pen portrait about what it was like, starting a business back in that era. What were those early days like? What do you remember from then?
Well, I think one of the things I remember is how the outdoor sector was very male dominated. If I think about myself, when I was really young, there wasn't really technical outdoor gear for females. So I was wearing maybe some, extra small men's shell jacket or whatever. That's clear. It wasn't only about the products, but also about the business, the people behind the businesses. It was really male dominated. Nothing negative about that. I didn't at all reflect on it, but of course now when you look back, that's something. So maybe that was one of the first escape acts for Houdini, like being female founded, female led, of course making products for both men and women, and acknowledging the differences in terms of product design that you would need to take into consideration. Later on, I think, and not that, maybe in the 90s then, or early 2000s, 90s, then it was more about, and I remember so well how, outdoor gear, really good technical outdoor gear, was expensive, but many times it was designed in a way where you didn't care for aesthetics or, colors or design lines. It was much more blunt in the way it was designed. So why not make stuff beautiful when it's great in so many other ways? So that was another escape act, I guess, that we took on us to explore. How can we then create products that not only aesthetically are beautiful, because that's of course an opinion for every person to decide for themselves, but create products that, for instance, I could go hiking in the morning with the same gear that I then go for a coffee in town or go to a pub or a club in the evening. So making life more easy, and that's probably easier if you design products in a way that they aesthetically blend in rather than, stand out in every other way than one, a climbing jacket that becomes much more than a climbing jacket, a pair of shorts that's not only for downhill mountain biking, but works in many other different occasions. Yeah, so things like that. I think we looked at the world and said that, yeah, maybe this could be done different. I would really like that for myself. So I think that much of the ideas came from our own use of products and our way of life, kind of.
Yeah, and I still feel deep sadness about the Fjällräven Greenland jacket that I had in this incredible sky blue, Eva, that basically I put in a roof box and then drove down a French autoroute with the roof box still open. And then basically the jacket blew out onto the motorway, onto the autoroute. And it was about a 200-kilometer sort of round circle back. And we were just saying, like, we were in an electric car. We were like, we are not going to be able to basically go back and get that jacket. And I felt so sad. And in my mind, I told Donna at Fjällräven this. And, in my mind, I'm sort of hoping that somebody has got this jacket and has sort of worn it. But what's really annoying is like a sort of child in a school, I wrote my telephone number in it, thinking if I ever lose this thing, then maybe someone will call me and they'll be like, Patrick, we've got your jacket. So, folks, if you've got my Fjällräven blue-green Greenland jacket, please feel free to send it back to me. I'm happy to pay the postage and maybe even a little finder's fee. I'll feature you as a named contributor on this show if you send it back to me. I love what you said about challenging the conventions and this idea of the escape acts. I mean, you still see now sporting apparel and outdoor brands. Yeah, there's a bit more diversity of ownership, but still this sort of idea of shrink it and pink it is still very prevalent. Still, there's a real predominance of men in senior leadership roles in these industries. There are some incredible women, that are absolutely kicking in these across both industries. But it still feels, I see on this show as I interview people, it's predominantly men I speak to. And actually, when I get a chance to ask previous contributors, who do you want to hear from? It's often women who haven't been heard on other platforms before ever. And I wonder, how do we get our industry to just really go, you know what, just excluding 50% of, the population is just bad business. How do we start to change that and do an escape act on the ownership piece, do you think?
I don't know. And as I said, I think that I haven't been focusing a lot on that, but I can also see that there's for sure evolution in the right direction. Don't you agree?
Definitely.
But I'm much more, and of course it comes from the same way of thinking, perhaps. But not including other groups, not including the living system that we all depend on and that we all love. And the species, there's so much we don't consider or take into consideration when we do business. Females, yes, even though we realize intellectually that it's probably much smarter to have them involved. And then, nature as this perfectly functioning, constantly evolving as a complex system that we can learn so much from, designing circular rather than linear, creating zero waste instead of tons of waste. There's so much to learn if we are curious and bold enough to expand our perspectives with the help of others, with the help of nature. And that is, to me, so weird that we don't, that we stay clinging to, old ways of thinking and old ways of doing things rather than, maybe this is, or I'm sure that this is the adventure of our lifetime, to expand our perspectives and learn to do things in a new way that is smart now, but also important or essential for the future. Yeah. So.
No, it's so fascinating because, as you say, it's a business that has the word outdoor in it. And yet then we never consider the externalities. We never go like, water use or sort of raw materials use or global supply chains or labor imbalances. And yeah, there are good initiatives that are happening, but they're not joined up in a systemic way. And I think, one of the heroes of mine growing up was Dame Ellen MacArthur, and obviously she's now been talking a lot about this. But like, I remember hearing her story when she talked about how she used to save her lunch money, and she said, I heard her on the radio the other day. She said, I got 7 pence, which is like a couple of öre in Swedish. I know you're on the euro now, but like I'm thinking old money. She said, I got 7 pence a day for school lunches. She said, and I would try and save 3 to 4 pence. That's like 50% of her school money. And she said, I eventually got to like £500 in like a pot, and I managed to buy a 12-foot yacht. She said, but then I didn't have any money to basically like put it in the water. She said, so it sat in my parents' garden, and I just would go out there and I'd like put the sails up and I'd do all these things. And now look at her. I mean, she literally is such an inspiring character. And I think what she's talking about in terms of sustainability, in terms of circular economy, and in terms of using her platform, she just said, I couldn't go on another round the world yacht race because I realized the damage I was doing to the planet. And if I'd spent 3 years doing that, that was 3 years I was not working on the climate emergency. And I think hearing you talk, I'm reminded a lot of those sorts of, principles as well, Eva.
I hadn't heard that early part of her story about saving money too, but she lived on that yacht. She had to live a circular life. And when you start exploring that, there's a lot of opportunities, smart solutions like saving rain when it's raining instead of thinking of rain as something irritating. There's so many. Can you hear the rain now?
Yes.
It's pouring down like cats and dogs, as you say.
Definitely.
But is it okay?
Totally. Yeah, this is good. When I interviewed Philip Tavel, who was at Helly Hansen and is now at Dynafit, his partner was about to go into labour at any moment. So I had to force him to promise me that if his phone rang in the middle of the interview, that he'd get up and go. And he was like, of course, being a Scandinavian dad, he was so sort of like, yeah, I'm just going to be sacking this podcast, crap off. No problem at all. Sorry, Philip. You were so generous and kind. But he was like, no, I'm going to just be running out. And I was like, perfect. So this is good. It's like, let's just be honest about the scale of the challenge, the fact that these constraints are actually massive opportunities. And again, it's like, why is our industry so scared about sticking to business as usual? Because there literally is no, business on a dead planet.
No, really. But I think that it reminds me of a quote, not the complicated one, but, if you think about it, we used to be a small world on a big planet. And now we're a big world on a very small planet in comparison. So it's not about, blaming people or pinpointing that we did everything wrong and trying to blame it on the past or the big companies or whatever. But it's really our generation, we have to figure out how to do things differently, because now we are this big world on a small planet, and a planet that we love and that we share with so many other species. And there's so much to do in order then to explore business from that point of view. If an outdoor brand, many times, even nowadays, but I remember when I was much younger, and the communication, brand communication, when it's about conquering the mountain, enduring the elements, conquering the mountain, all of that, it's I guess it's a mindset. And maybe that reflects not only how you try to become a cool, credible brand, but maybe it's a mindset that we need to kind of escape from as well. Conquering the mountain or dancing with the mountains, as we have been playing around in our own company. Like, what would dancing with the mountains look like instead of conquering the mountains?
It's a very sort of
picture of mind.
Yeah, I think that's so great, and it reminds me. I used to, when I had hair, Eva, go whitewater paddling, kayaking, And one of the guides there, just a lovely, lovely guy, Andy, basically always said, like, look at where you want to go in the river. Don't look at where you don't want to go. And I think, we're hearing you talk about, it's not about blame. It's not about, it is about systemic understanding and understanding the levers that we can pull. But it's not saying people have done bad, people have done good. It's actually saying, how do we, like, almost seduce is the wrong word, but how do we, like, tempt people into a better version of the future? And I'm really interested, like, a lot of brands say they want to go down that sort of sustainability route. They say they want to balance people, product, and planet. But when it comes to it, really struggle. Like, you must have faced pushback as you've started to try and do this in your own business. Talk to me about how you've, maybe first, like, how have you managed yourself through that pushback? Because I'm always fascinated on the sort of inner journey that people make as they try and go through things that are really, really difficult.
One of my driving forces or passions is beauty, and beauty not only at the superficial or surface level, but rather if you look at nature again and the beauty of that system, where there's tons of value created and beneath that value is another layer of value and another layer of value, and that beauty, not only in detail, that too, but also in the systemic way. It's very cool, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then in an innovation process to remind ourselves of that and figure out how to create the same layers of beauty throughout in a material design or product design or way of thinking about customer brand relationships. There's so many things that can be and has to be reimagined, and there are so many opportunities, like we said, in doing that. For instance, when it comes to something else than materials, because of course many times people think about circularity, and that is the flow of materials and not creating waste. But another part of circularity to us is, thinking about the relations in between customers and brand. Maybe it needs to be relational, and we've evolved to something in the world which is very much transactional only. And if we bring relations along, that brings a lot of opportunities. I mean, companies are paying tons of money for creating loyalty after a transactional process. But instead, let's just build relations from the start, and then loyalty will. Yeah, exactly. So there's really so many things that we can. When we go with the current rather than against the current, there's going to be value creation and self-organizing things happening in a good way. I don't know. It sounds very fluffy, but when it comes down to business, it also has to be scientifically proven. We need to know that what we do instead of this actually brings more value or eliminates the negative aspects that we are trying to get away with. So being science-based, but also allowing ourselves to dream and then aligning the two. I think that's how we've been working.
Yeah, and I think when we just try and reduce everything to a return on investment, that's not life either. And hearing you talk reminded me a lot of the writings of Rebecca Solnit, who's written really sort of incredible books all about the climate emergency and about sort of the agency that individuals can have to sort of tackle those sorts of things. I was also thinking, when you were talking about that sort of dance and the duality between brand and consumer, like, we when we're running training, for example, we always talk about this idea of, like, if we delight the learner inside the business, actually they'll go on to delight the consumer. But how many times do businesses just put colleagues, teammates through courses that are really boring, really long, really unfocused? It doesn't have to be boring. And I think you talk about reimagining. One of the key words that I keep on coming back to as I build Outrageous is just basically this idea of delight. I think that can be a way in which we just differentiate ourselves from this massive, robot overlord future that we're potentially facing, Eva. It's actually like, let's delight people. Let's give them that feeling that they get when they, drop off a waterfall in a kayak. Let's give them that feeling, when they're standing at the top of a ski run in Aura. Let's give them that feeling when they look over a beautiful mountain. It's like delight is one of those things that like a computer is never going to build. Do you know what I mean?
Very true.
So what I was interested in is like you've been on this journey, and I wonder like what have been, one or two sort of really key learnings for you from it, Eva? What have you really taken from, your time running this, incredible brand?
That change is possible, and that the journey towards something new is always very exciting. And maybe you've set your mind to change something. For instance, it's to be a little more concrete. For instance, when we started looking into microplastics, and we do mid layers and outer layers, but mid layers, of course, fleece is a typical example of the potential to shed microfibers. And of course, that's not something an outdoor brand wants to do. And that was in 2012, so quite a long time ago. And we decided then and hooked up with our different partners around the world that we do technical development with, and said that we need to fix this. We cannot accept microplastics. So how do we re-engineer our fabrics? For instance, there are so many things we can do, but one of the things is that we decided that this and that fabric needs to be dropped out of the collection here and now, and then let's re-engineer them so that they don't shed fibers anymore. But then when we went into the design and innovation process, we started exploring fabric technologies in a new way. And suddenly we had, mid layers that didn't shed fibers, but also had a new feature that made them much more, the layering comfort was much more advanced and much more comfortable. So there's so many things that can, I can't. Sorry for my English, but we set out.
I'm so relieved we're not doing this in Swedish, Eva, because otherwise it'd be a very
setting out to solve one problem and then figuring out something that is, a dreamy material that can eliminate the need for fleece. Those are the things that I have learned. So that means that it's much easier to step into a very, a process that might feel difficult, more maybe even impossible. But I've seen so many times now that it's not impossible. And many times it's just because we've been marinated in a way of thinking for a long, long time throughout our lifetime and maybe generations before us as well. And when we get out of that way of thinking, we have many more opportunities to solve things.
And in fact, hearing you talk reminded me of, Donna's work at Fjällräven, where they were saying, her and Martin, the CEO, wanted to remove PFAS from the entire lineup. But actually, one of the biggest challenges they were facing was actually the pushback from the sales team, who were saying, what, you want us to sell like a product that is more expensive, less flexible, perhaps slightly less water resistant, and not chemically treated? It's like you're making our job harder. And I think it's like, how do we tell that story? And I love what you said there. It's like there's no such thing as impossible. There are only trials. And that's one of those sorts of ideas that I really, really strongly believe in.
Can I, Patrick? Can
Please.
I just a reflection there?
You may always.
I think that
this is a dance between the two of us, Eva. It's like
that's great,
what
Patrick.
the world doesn't need is another
and I'll do my
white
best
guy
in
with
Swedish.
another white guy with a podcast. Come on, let's just make this a two-way street, Eva.
No, but I'm thinking that sometimes maybe that is a fact. You have to explain that this is a trial and it's important, but our most successful cases is where we've actually invented something that makes the old way of thinking or making products obsolete. And the new is the more attractive solution. And I think that means that you don't have to fight with your sales team. You don't have to push tons of information or promotion on your customers. It becomes a natural choice. That's also working with nature rather than against nature. So that is also something that we've experienced so many times, that we can actually make a better product. And then the customers will, of course, choose that better product.
What is your all-time favorite ever product that you've ever had across your industry? You don't have to say something from Houdini, of course. If you want to, that's totally fine, Eva. But if I said to you, you're on a desert island, we have a show here called Desert Island Discs, and people get to take 8 records with them, and they get to have one personal item. What would be that personal item that you would take from the sort of outdoor industry? What would that actually be for you?
Well, maybe I can say 2. 2 examples. I'm wearing one. This is like a second skin to me, and I'm addicted to this product, and we launched it quite recently. It's fuzzy, but shedding free, which is an amazing thing in itself. But then it's a yarn that we developed together with a Japanese partner of ours that can then be made into a garment without making a fabric first, with cutting waste and all that. So instead, it's a beautiful technical yarn, and with modern technology, we can knit that into a garment that feels like it's a cozy second skin that keeps me warm when I was up this morning on the mountain. Breathes super well, and it packs super small. It's called Lycan. That's an amazing thing. And we talked a lot about this before we managed to get it right. For years, we talked about, zero waste design. How can we do it? And how can we knit something 3-dimensional rather than, shipping fabric rolls across the globe? 2-dimensional fabrics where there's then cutting waste in between, I don't know, sometimes 5%, but sometimes even 15%, I think, if you look at the industry in general. Mm. And of course, those fabrics are often expensive as well. So this is one favorite. I always bring it everywhere. But if I would go to that desert island that you're talking about, I would probably bring my favorite t-shirt that's underneath here, and that's in an organic material, a merino wool. And that merino wool has been processed in a very modern, advanced way. And that sounds maybe to many that it takes a lot of advanced chemicals and stuff like that, but it's the opposite. We've eliminated a lot of processes and shifted from chemistry that shouldn't probably be used at all to pure chemistry. That means that when I've worn that garment on that desert island for years, at the end of the day, it can be composted and turned into soil where I could grow my vegetables later on. That's probably more of the future. That is the future I think that we all should be aiming at.
Yeah. That's so
products that work in themselves, work with nature. So
just tell me, with the lichen, for example, was that, where did the inspiration come for that? Was it you going out and listening and responding to consumers, or was it you as and these are my words, I know you'd never say this about yourself, but was it you as the genius sort of creator plucking an idea from out of your experience and the past and saying, this is actually how we can do things differently. Like where, just using that as an example, like where do truly innovative ideas come for you?
Mm. It was me, the genius. No, I'm just kidding. No,
I
I
only
think
want
it's two
guests who are really
things.
modest, Eva.
I think it's definitely, in this particular case, it's two things. One is, down garments, or down, the function of down is something beautiful, packs light, all of that. And we don't use down at Houdini because, there's not only for sustainability reasons, but that of course as well, but we don't use down. But the idea of down and the way that down works for a bird, you only have the down. You don't have a lot of outer fabric, lining fabric, zippers and pockets and seams and stuff like that. It's only the down. Imagine making a mid layer that's like that, what birds are wearing. So that was the idea when we developed this yarn, to make something that is as close to a feather as possible. That is one. So craving from an athlete's perspective, I think that is, a user perspective, having something that packs light and is soft against skin and so forth. So that was a dream idea from our side, and not mine, but the whole design team together. And then the work we've been doing for so long, which is aiming towards zero waste. So it's two dreams, coming together into one. And I think that is how we often need to do things, not stay within a silo and work on a project with only one perspective, but to expand into the systems perspective and then back. So when we do innovation and design, it's really moving in and out towards the systemic point of view or perspective, and then down to the microscopic level again, and in and out, to make sure that we don't forget something really important on the way.
Yeah, so it's that classic double diamond. It's the sort of, diverging and converging piece, looking out beyond. And I get the sense that if you're such a sort of fan of beauty, you're probably drawing not just from nature, but from culture and from other brands and from consumers and from literature and from theatre and all these other sort of, influences, probably.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Life is all of life is a source for inspiration and ideas and sharing knowledge and stuff like that. And of course, we bring all of that. That's the beauty of life, isn't it?
Definitely.
That there's so much to be inspired by and in awe of.
Well,
How do I
I'm
pronounce
excited
that
about.
well?
No, I loved it. I mean, I just want to do a quick public sector announcement or public service announcement, folks, which is that every Swede I've ever met in my entire life says, "Oh, forgive my English, it's not good." And then basically, I speak like 5 out of 10 Swedish. And whenever I go there and start speaking Swedish, they all just come out in perfect English. Like I've literally never met anyone in Sweden who doesn't speak word perfect, almost better English than English people. So I am so relieved you haven't forced me, Eva. I know you would never do that, to do this interview in Swedish, because I think my knowledge of sort of material science or circularity would be found wanting within about 4 seconds. We only have time for 2 more questions, Eva, and I'm going to be so sad because I've enjoyed being here with you in your car outside your beautiful sort of red Swedish house in the mountains. Folks, it's absolutely gorgeous. Shame you can't see it, although if you watch it on YouTube, you can see it. But for those of you listening, you've missed out, and just boo sucks to you. Although I love you, but it's great. But watch it on YouTube as well. It'd be fun. Eva, one of the things we've talked about, I think, here is about how we highlight and sort of listen to, people whose voices are not often heard. And a question I ask every guest is like, is there somebody who you think would be a great guest for this show? And I think, just coming back to that idea about beauty, we talked about it a bit in the round. one of the things I really believe is that actually if you listen really deeply to people, that can also have a beauty inherent in it. And I guess I'm interested, is there somebody that you think we should try and get as a guest on this show that you think has got a great story?
I think there are so many that I'd love to hear in a conversation with you, but just a couple of suggestions maybe. One, and I'm back to, I am Swinglish, and I realize that I don't pronounce things right, but Katie Drake, I don't know how to pronounce her name, somebody that inspires me immensely. She's a marketing brand strategist based in Portland, US. She's been working with so many brands, but she also has this expanding worldview that and curious enough to always can keep on expanding that. I would love to hear a conversation between the two of you. Another one that I had the honor of meeting back when I was really, really young, just out of high school, that was Christine Tompkins, who was then the CEO of Patagonia. She's had an amazing life and making life choices that I am so impressed by. That would be interesting. I would love to hear her perspective on the outdoor industry now, when we know so much more and have so many more reasons to act decisively and with force and speed, and maybe that's not happening the way it should.
And it just and it proves that the earlier conversation we had is probably more rather than less right, which is that actually just more information doesn't get somebody to take action in a burning building. Actually, it's how we coax, it's how we inspire, it's how we enthuse, it's how we collaborate, it's how we build together, it's how we listen. All of those things are actually how we shift people to action. And I think, again, just saying, oh, it's too difficult, it can't be done, is just surrendering to this sort of defeatism that I have taken from this call, that is something that you would never give into. I'm sure at times you feel it, Eva, and there must have been times where you're just like, oh my God, we're still knocking our head against a brick wall on this stuff, but you've kept going. And that's certainly something I'm going to take from this call. Now tell me, final question, and then we'll wrap up. The people who listen to this show are in the sporting apparel and outdoor worlds. Do you have an ask for them?
Yeah, I would say that going on this adventure of exploring how we could shift from working at the expense of nature towards doing it in partnership with nature. And that includes collaboration in between each other as well. That, I think, is the journey that I would love to see everybody on board on. Despite the realization that the systems that we work within, the financial system, the legal systems, everything is kind of working against us as it is now, but it's still possible, and that is the way we're going to be able to shift the systems as well. So yes, doing it together and hooking up, connecting to support each other on that journey and having fun on that journey, I would say.
Eva, thank you for being a wonderful guest. Thank you for saying yes to my crazy, insistent LinkedIn pursuit of you. I'm so happy that I have got to meet you and chat with you. I say this to many guests. I hope you'll come back one day as a co-host, and maybe we can interview somebody fun, because I think you'd have some really great perspective on that. So one for you to consider. You don't have to say yes or no, but one day come back and be my co-host. I'd love it.
Yeah, would love to, Patrick. And thanks for connecting us and being patient and being okay with me being in the car in the middle of the mountains with a poor connection.
No, I'm so jealous.
It's lovely.
I'm really, really jealous. Folks, I'm just flying to Sweden now to go and meet Eva in the mountains. So I'll see you in about 6 weeks' time. If you've
Perfect.
enjoyed today's show, please do leave a review on Apple or Spotify. Would be hugely appreciated. And until the next time, thank you so much for listening.